we have so many other fights cooking in other states, and we have these 3 lawsuits now in Utah. And part of that's because they're all part of the same legal settlement that we kind of committed to years ago. And so it looks like we're in 3 lawsuits, but we're really in 3 different tracks of a lawsuit we started a while ago that we can't walk away from because it affects so much. But these precedents we're fighting over with buffer zones and with the Explore Act and these things, these apply to everybody. If we can define these effectively here, that's going to give us legal tools we can use to go and start implementing those decisions into other states and things. And so I want folks everywhere to know, like, we're always thinking nationally about this work. And even though it looks like these are concentrating in one area, there were strategic decisions that I'm not like a lot of our legal strategy I'm not going to talk about on a podcast, but that one I like talking about. I want people to know we're trying to do things that are going to broadly improve our recreation access everywhere. Hey, this is Ben Burr from the Blue Ribbon Coalition, and you are listening to the Trailhead Podcast. Wave it up, let it roar, feel the ground shake. Pedal down, dust flying, no time to waste. The trailhead's calling, engine power on a roll. This is where trails start and stories unfold. On the starlit skies, where the wild things roam. Every trail a journey, every Jeep a home. Meet me at the trailhead, where the wild ones run. The dust kicks high and the day's not done. With the road wide open and the dirt in our soul. This is where trails start and our stories unfold.
Welcome back to the Trailhead for another BRC brief, and today's episode is a special one. Not only are we bringing back Ben Burr, Executive Director of the Blue Ribbon Coalition, but this officially marks our 100th episode of the Trailhead. That turns out to be rather fitting. The last time Ben was here, we were unpacking the chaos of the lame duck session and the land grabs and closures that came in the final days of the last administration. Here we are now, bookending that discussion with the first 100 days of the new one. From courtroom battles in Utah to legislative pushes, monument challenges, and other major policy reversals, the Blue Ribbon Coalition has been at the center of all of it. We're going to break it all down, what's changed, what hasn't, and of course, what's next. Welcome back to the Trailhead, and welcome back to the show, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us this is, like I said, this is our 100th episode, man.
Yeah, good to be here on big number 100. That's a lot of podcasts.
It's a lot of podcasts. It's a lot of hours in front of this camera. But it's been fun. And you were essentially our fourth. It ended up being our 4th and 5th episode because I thought it was still a good idea to split them at that time. But you were our 4th episode. We're deep in the middle of the Moab stuff. So thank you very much for kind of coming full circle with us on this.
Yeah, that one was a banger. If people haven't listened to that one yet, you should go back.
It was. You had some good ones in that, man. There was some hot moments in that. I really got to revisit that and just kind of pull some clips and just play them out. So I don't want them out of context now this late in the game. It's been a year and a half since that.
And
anyhow.
still rolling. We have a court date on that fight scheduled for May 22nd.
There it is.
And so that's what we do know at this time. Okay. But we also know that the government has asked for a 90-day extension or forbearance or something on that because they're wanting to kind of wait till all their decision makers get in place before they kind of move these consequential actions along. And SUA opposed that. But we're still waiting for the judge to rule on whether he's going to grant more time there for the government to get what they want. But as far as we know, we're prepared for the 22nd, and that's what we're planning on. But that might change. But okay. If it changes, it means so it's hard to know what that'll mean. You don't want to get too concrete on what your predictions are, but we can look to the past. In 2021, when Biden came in, SUA was in the flip side of us on a lawsuit challenging that the Trump administration in the first term had opened a bunch of trails in the San Rafael Desert, and they sued to challenge them that they should have closed more. And the Trump administration was defending their decision, and then the Biden administration came in the middle of that. And about a year into that, there was an announcement out of the blue that SUA and the Biden administration had settled that lawsuit and agreed to go through a process to close additional trails in that plan. And so whether that's how this plays out, we don't know. We are at a different stage. We've actually had arguments before the court. It's briefed up. But again, an administration change does often lead to changes in litigation strategy and priorities and argumentation. And if you've watched the first 100 days of this administration, there have been numerous executive orders and secretarial orders really signaling that we're 180 degrees turn in direction as being generous. I mean, they are going in a very different direction from what the previous administration was doing.
I mean, yeah, the last time you were here, we were talking the lame duck session and potential national monument designations in the last minute and expansions of some of those things as that the last administration kind of left the house.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's ironic that we're here then on 100th episode and then talking about the first 100 days of the new administration, because a lot has changed. There's still a lot of stuff is still in flux, like you're talking about. They still are looking to get people appointed to specific positions and in place to get stuff done. So that's the 100 days. And we've been over this before, but for those of you who are unaware, with the first 100 days is really just kind of a political marker that has been put out there by pundits and people, and just to kind of measure a new administration's progress and how much change they're doing. And so in the context of what we're talking about here, it's mostly about trails and how it impacts stuff like the Moab closures and all of that other stuff, including a lot of the stuff we kind of talked about towards the last end there. And then on the last episode, there were a couple national monument designations and a couple of other things. Where do we start to kind of update real quick on that list? Do we talk about like the Swell challenges? Do we talk about all that stuff?
Yeah, let's talk about how the lame duck session played out.
Okay.
And then we can talk about how this first 100 days has gone, and then what we hope to see happen beyond that. I think that's probably a good sequence of things to cover.
That works.
So if we go back to the lame duck session, we were worried that there was up to 9, and then it became 10 national monuments that they were wanting to designate in various different states. It ended up being about 5 million acres worth of land that would have been locked up in the form of a national monument designation. And ultimately, what was designated was the Chuckwalla National Monument and the Satitla National Monument. Both are in California. But those add to the other ones that got created by Biden. He did one in Nevada. We did one in northern Arizona. He expanded the 2 in Utah. He did a smaller one in Colorado. He designated there was this marine sanctuary designated off the coast of California. I mean, and then there were expansions. Like, I don't think we had talked yet, but there was an expansion of the San Gabriel Mountain National Monument into the Angeles National Forest, and that expansion is where those fires burned around LA. And so there had actually been a national monument expansion, and that's one of the big core areas that was the fuel load for that fire. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so we did see the monuments get established. And in addition to that, there were a handful of last minute plans that really got rushed out the door those last few weeks in late December and into January. And so of the ones, so there were in Utah, we had the San Rafael Swell, and that closed 665 miles of trails in that area. And then they also did the Henry Mountains, which closed 612 miles in that area, which is just south of the San Rafael Swell. They rushed out a rule through the National Park Service that was going to close just a handful of trails, but they're very high value trails in Glen Canyon National Park. And that's an area that just this week Congress voted through Congressional Review Act to basically rescind that rule through a process that hasn't been voted on in the Senate yet, but it only takes 51 votes in the Senate to do this action. So that it's very likely it'll pass the Senate and President Trump will sign it. And that'll make it so that these trails in Glen Canyon that have been going back and forth between being open and closed for years now, the Park Service won't be able to introduce a similar rule for a whole period of time, which I think is 20 years. Like this will, in many ways, kind of reopen those trails for the very near future. And in addition to that, we had there was a plan up in Oregon called the Lakeview Plan. That's one we've been looking at now, and it closed a lot of things, and it had a lot of problematic precedents that we don't like. And I'd have to ask Simone, but there were more. And so those are some of the what we call the lame duck land grabs that happened. And of those, we are litigating the San Rafael Swell plan. We're currently in court on that. We filed our initial motions on that. We are also litigating the Henry Mountains plan. That got filed about 2 weeks ago. And just today, we filed a complaint challenging the designation of the Chuckwalla National Monument in California. And so, and while also taking a broader attack to the Antiquities Act, just because it is possible Trump will shrink monuments or rescind monuments. He one of the very first orders that he signed was an energy emergency executive order that required the Secretary of Interior to do a review of any policies that are preventing energy development on federal public land, and it specifically called out the regulations that implement the Antiquities Act. And then Secretary Burgum also came into office and issued a secretarial order to review national monuments. That had a deadline of like 15 days, and so that's long past. We have yet to see any action, and it's all the chatter is that they'll do something.
Right.
But we haven't seen anything yet. And even if Trump does do something, that's great. It will provide relief. It'll reopen access to areas that are now either closed or very likely to be closed in the future. But if Congress doesn't act, it won't be permanent. Or if we don't get a case before the Supreme Court, it won't be permanent. And so we definitely would like to see a monument challenge go to the Supreme Court. And so we're starting to play the field and make sure
stop doing these things by executive order back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court has signaled they definitely have concerns with the abuse of power in this act. And it's just the challenge of getting through the gauntlet of the lower courts and the appellate courts and all of that. And we feel like we found good cases and good plaintiffs and have good arguments that need to be decided, and we'll see where it goes. But we're excited to have another crack at the Antiquities Act in the works right now. So that's how the lame duck session went and the work we're doing to unravel a lot of it.
Well, so before we get into that, and based on our last conversation, do you think that it was overall as you expected? Was it worse or better of a lame duck session? Like how does it on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being the worst?
I would say I wanted to say 6, but I'd probably say 4.
Okay.
They really could have designated all those monuments, but I think you had this situation where they were like, we kind of know they were signing a lot of this stuff with the auto pen. And I don't know how actively engaged President Biden actually was. A lot of the other people had checked out. I mean, the folks who were signing the decisions of these ones I mentioned, there was like some guy named Steve Feldkis who was like the bottom of the list of people who could sign under the authority of the secretary, allegedly, Yeah. And so they were kind of just, and I think there is a concern that if they went really, really big, that would have been really triggering to the incoming administration and it could have derailed things. And so I think that the tone at the time is there. I'm sure there were certainly corners where they're like, we've got to go big, but there's always this concern that if they go too big, you create a backlash. But I still think the backlash has been building for 30 years on the Antiquities Act. Whatever happened this time around, it was still going to keep snowballing. And
I don't think they could have stopped it at this point. I think all of the stuff that we've been talking about all this time. Mm-hmm.
But I will also say they were more prepared this time. They got a lot of things done in time to where they couldn't be undone by this Congressional Review Act, the thing that they're using on this Glen Canyon rule. So they actually got a lot more done outside of the window of the lame duck session. And that's where, we went back to Washington early on, like in February, and we were giving these to the congressional staffers. There weren't people in the administration yet although there were some, but we didn't have a heavy visit with a lot of administration folks. But these are everything we commented on. The Forest Service and the Department of Interior. We call it the grand reopening of our public lands and of our national forests. It was over 356 actions that Blue Ribbon Coalition made a comment on to preserve or protect or enhance or do that somehow these would have affected outdoor recreation.
Right.
It would have affected 190 million acres of land, tens of thousands of miles of roads. Right. And so to say, well, what was a lame duck session of 4? This was like an 11. To have this much crap going on, and we have this much work to undo.
Yeah.
And the good news is, so if we now transition over to talking about what's going on in these first 100 days, they've taken all of this regulatory infrastructure to the woodshed. And so to unravel a lot of the closures and restrictions and things that got done, there's probably never been a better time in history to go and re-examine a lot of this stuff. And I think that a lot will get done once we get the right deputy secretaries and undersecretaries in place that can make some decisions, so it's not all just falling on the secretary's plate who's overwhelmed. I think you'll see a lot of interesting things.
No, I mean, there's been some interesting things already, right? Like the 30 by 30 is officially, that's been rescinded, right? Like that order got rescinded.
So there are 26 executive orders that we want them to rescind or examine, remove, reform, something, mostly rescind. They've done 5 so far. Okay. 30 by 30 was one of them. And so as soon as we have the right people to meet with, we're going to be like, well, here's 21 more if you guys want to keep putting points on the scoreboard.
Hey, every little bit counts. Yeah.
And there's currently a portal that like the Office of Management and Budget is soliciting regulatory reform ideas. And so they're looking for submissions of which parts of the codes of federal regulations are causing problems for people. We're preparing a whole collection of those. Probably have an action alert that we can encourage our members to also go and help us request that those get reviewed. Okay. We have all of these environmental analysis documents of the previous administration and then I told Simone, I'm like, you're my policy director. I'm like, you might not have a lot to do, but that's actually not true. We've had a lot of new projects come out in the first 100 days out of the agencies. Oh, okay. But they're a very different flavor of project.
What do you mean?
80% of them is just the Forest Service wanting to go manage the forests, at least. Oh, 80%. Yeah, they just want to go the stuff that's been like things that have been sitting on the shelves for years, or that. Yeah. And you have. And part of this is also in response to them reducing the length of analysis. If you want to come start mining a claim on federal land or do an energy project, there's a process you have to go through that usually by agency current standards takes 4 years. It's called an EIS. And the travel plan in Moab, that was called an EA, like an environmental assessment. Mm-hmm. EAs take 2 years on a good day.
Yeah, I haven't. I've never had one take 2 years.
Like they have released internal guidance telling them you now have 14 days to do an EA and 28 days to do an EIS instead of 2 years and 4 years.
Wow.
And so they're doing a lot of these projects. You had this order to accelerate logging on our national forests, and it was kind of hilarious because you had a lot of the folks that disagree with that. I was getting a lot of that in my feed of people like, Trump's going to cut down all 200 million acres of our forests, and he better not dare touch one tree. And I'm like, I'm looking at the people in these videos, and they're like sitting there with a big wooden desk behind them. I'm like, you're literally like making this video, and your set piece is the carcass of is a taxidermy tree. This is a scene of a crime. And you're sitting here advocating for the trees, but no one's killed more trees than you, Mrs. Western Watersheds Project, or whoever it is.
You are not the Lorax. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so then I go look at these projects. We did an action alert on one of them, and it was like, we want to do stream bank restoration through this, and we're removing fire loads, and there's going to be 300 acres of commercial thinning. So someone's going to go make a profit on 300 acres. But most of this is like 90% ecosystem enhancement. It's something that if it was Biden doing it, all these people would be like, actually still suing him,
Yeah.
honestly.
No, they probably will still try to. Yeah. There's
And so there's a lot of things where we're just like looking at the truth of what's actually being proposed now. Like there's a lot of rhetoric about how, I mean, you might have seen the video I made. We went up to Dead Horse Point because they're saying because they're going to lease federal land to oil and gas, that's just going to close off every acre to recreation. And there's people in our comments that are like, we can't believe you support energy production. They're just going to close it off to you. And I'm just like, have you ever been on federal public land that's not a national park? Because
there's plenty of private use out there everywhere
there
we go.
is energy projects all over
Yep.
it. Like I
Yeah.
could, the most purest anti-energy people can make sincere arguments that they don't like the eyesore of a well pad. Fine, it's still only 2 acres of disturbance that's permanently removed from access. You know, it's like
There's
it's not enough to worry about, and those companies maintain all the roads. They're the reason there's even access in the first place.
yeah.
And
There's wells off of Gemini Bridges,
yeah,
and
that's what I'm
I
talking
guarantee.
about.
Yeah, most times most people don't see. You don't even see the drills and the rigs. Like if you're unless you're really looking for them.
Yeah, I mean they're required to paint them to blend in with the landscape. They have to go to the smallest available footprint. There's a lot of roads I've been up in that area where there's actually a pipeline running alongside them, and so they're
Hmm.
pipeline maintenance roads, but we're still allowed to use them for recreation. Like I have other than like the 2 acre well pad site, I've never come across a fence from a public land leaseholder. I've driven across active mining claims. I like it's at some point a mine gets big enough and it could become a big open pit mine, and that's a whole different question. That's where it starts to fall into like the equivalent of a wind power project for us or a solar panel, where what is multiple use now is becoming single use, and there are going to be barbed wire fences and you're cut out, and we should analyze that. And there was times where I mean we did intervene and make public comments against projects that create single use on multiple use land. But definitely like this broad rhetoric of this is just going to be catastrophically bad for recreation. I bet they can't point to a single acre that's currently was open and is now closed because of these Trump executive orders. And so it'll be interesting. You have this narrative out there that they're going to privatize land, and the Housing and Urban Development Department did come out with some rules and policies saying we want to use federal lands for solving the affordable housing crisis. And people are reading that to mean we're going to go start building houses in national parks and things. And that's not what's going to happen. There are the very near when that was released, um, Las Vegas announced a sale. I'm going to see if I have the tab open on this. They had sold private land or public land in Las Vegas within the city boundaries.
Within the city boundaries. I feel like
Within
that's
the
an
city
important note.
boundaries,
Mhm.
there were parcels of BLM land because all of Las Vegas's expansion has been out into BLM land.
Oh, okay.
And that was all done through the Southern Nevada Land Policy Management Act, and it's allowed. And that was an act that was written by Harry Reid, passed with enthusiastic support by Democrats. It allows for the disposal of public land to be used for housing or public purposes. And so a lot of the community buildings and city infrastructure and roads and housing in the outskirts of Las Vegas has been acquired by Las Vegas through this act. And they're vacant parcels surrounded by suburbia. The BLM doesn't want to manage these. They have no recreation value. Nobody's wanting to build signs. They probably have very little conservation value, if any at all. And I didn't see like Trout Unlimited out there protesting the sale of these suburban parcels of land in Las Vegas. I didn't see any brave National Park Service employees hanging the flag upside down from these parcels saying, keep public lands in public hands. Nobody cared. The
Right.
only people who even tracked this was probably us. And the proceeds of the sale that it went to the Southern Nevada Water Conservancy District to improve water infrastructure. It went to recreation programs to improve trailheads and build recreation amenities. It went to community purposes and goods, and it was millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
And so to let municipalities and counties do a very limited amount of that, especially with parcels that are landlocked within their boundaries. We could start there, and I don't think it would be the end of the world. And I've talked to people that are BRC members who even like I say it like that, thinking, will they like this or not? And they're like, no, don't give away any of our public land. I hate running into fences in the backcountry, and we should never give away things. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. You agree with it, but it's like,
Not
am I going to
everything
go
has
die on the
value.
hill of that? Probably not.
Yeah.
But if they want to go turn Labyrinth Rims into a big subdivision, then we'll probably show up. I just
Yeah.
don't think, I think it's very unrealistic that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they've been doing it the other way around for a long time, right? And we talked about that the last time. They buy parcels of land that are sitting in the middle of a public or in a private area or a public area that they didn't own before to try to include that in the forest. It, if it makes sense to shift a piece of public land to this, or to shift a piece of private land to this because it doesn't have any value, I really don't understand why you get a whole lot of pushback. I mean, I do, because I feel like a lot of people are just
it should all be
uninformed. And
scrutinized, and it will all have to go through a
yeah,
public process. And we should all of us who are stakeholders should have a say in that. And, but it's also like, you talk to the National Park Service and they can't hire staff. Any one of them. Talk to any supervisor and say, even with all the staffing issues that are going on now with the current administration, you still, even before all that, it's like they were having staffing issues because no one could afford to live there. And so the agencies actually would probably welcome some additional affordable housing in their nearby areas adjacent to those communities. And it's always that land use and development is going to be controversial, but there are legitimate problems that you really can only solve by increasing a supply of housing. And we have tons of vacant land in the West. Water's probably a bigger concern.
yes,
And you have rural communities that really can't grow. And so they're stuck with stagnant tax bases that can't provide basic services. They have no, I mean, Garfield County in Utah is 95% public. They'll never be a county that can have economic development and growth and schools and roads and garbage collection at the level that any other normal county would enjoy that's built its whole system off property taxes. There's just not enough there.
mm-hmm.
And so and so there's a lot of issues there where I'm kind of like open-minded about it, but also I will defend the interests of our members if they want to go start building houses in areas with high recreation value, that especially if they affect trails and things that we've all fought for.
Right.
Those will be the times where I'm probably joining forces with groups I normally am opposed to.
Well, no, I like that. I like that. I feel like that, and I don't mean I don't like the conflict, right? I don't like conflict between any any groups of any kind, but that tells me that it's no longer a one-sided fight. That tells me that there are situations where, hey, we may have the upper hand in these arguments, and there may be situations where the other people have an upper hand in an argument. Now we have an opportunity to have much better discussion than we did 6 months ago.
Yeah. So all of that being said, I mean, there's a lot going on right now, a lot of new things to focus on. I mean, our first priority is we want to reopen things that got closed. That's where most of our attention is. If some of these new energy policies or forest policies or Department of Housing and Urban Development policies do start on, like, through the actual proposals in the Federal Register or NEPA in the register or whatever, if those actually start affecting and hurting recreation, we will engage. But we did an action alert on one of these. It was a proposed lithium mine in, I
Yeah.
believe it's northern Nevada, like right up there on the border of Nevada and Oregon. And I was like, okay, how's this going to affect recreation? This is just prospecting, right? Like they haven't found a resource, so there's no development. This is just they're exploring. So they're going to go drill a bunch of core samples and things, which means they're going to build new roads and kind of just go look around this area. And this is their analysis. There are no permanent recreation sites within the project area. Dispersed recreational activities may occur at the project area. However, proposed action is not closing public land. Let me repeat that. The proposed action is not closing public land. The company will be responsible for maintaining roadways and access to public lands for dispersed recreational access. Therefore, this EA will not analyze this resource because it's not impacting. So like that is
Okay.
their official word on this. And it's like we're not closing it. So recreation is going to be open.
Right.
And if anything, they're going to improve the recreation access to this area. And in our comment, we're like, well, if you're going to be building new sites out there, why don't we leave some of those leveled sites for dispersed campsites? Why don't you use this to enhance recreation if they don't find anything? Like, why don't you analyze, can this actually help? And we'll see what they do with it. I'm interested to see if this administration's open to a suggestion.
That'd be great. Yeah.
And because you get a lot of these forest treatment plans and they build new roads, but then they are forced to reclaim them all back to where they were. It would be nice to get some new roads. Let's keep some of them. Let's at least analyze keeping them.
Yeah. That's happening in my backyard right now on a logging project that many people had an issue with, but it's literally my backyard. Rampart Range here in Colorado is my backyard, and it was a tinderbox, and they've been cleaning it up for years. And me and Patrick McKay, your friend Patrick, we were just out over the weekend, and we were talking about the fact that if they just left the Forest Service roads open, we'd get so much more mileage out of the whole process, and we need it. We need that recreation area here.
Yeah. And now the forests are nice. You actually want to go into them. Let's leave a road in there. So we'll see. I mean, I think we're optimistic that, we keep calling it the grand reopening. And everyone's like, no way, this administration is going to sell it off and shut it all down. And I'm like, I'd be surprised if that's where this goes. But
okay.
Right now it's looking like they're just wanting to manage it more. That's the actual projects we're seeing come across the wires.
Oh, there you go. But that's why it's still important, even when it feels like the winds are favorable, to have folks like yourself who are actually keeping an eye on it, because we're not all plugged in all the time, and you guys are. And so thank you real quick. Thank you for that.
So there's a lot of, and it's the biggest frustration I have is that we're tracking all of this and it's just too much to get out there all at once and keep up with it all. Like, we keep up with it all internally, but to then repackage what's going on in a way that we can broaden out to all of our users and supporters. And we still get a lot out to them, but there's what we really package out and get to our people is 10 to 15% of what we're doing. And so it's all right. We're working hard. Someone's got to do it.
Hey, somebody's got to do it. And we appreciate you. And you mentioned this earlier. Is the Glen Canyon OHV plan, how is that being handled? Is that part of an administration thing, or is that being just handled under the CRA?
But a little bit of everything. Let me give you the background on that. Like, this was something that had been worked on for years before the first Trump administration's term. And during that first term, they opened access on these trails. What that means is there are a few trails, existing roads, that they allowed street legal side-by-sides and dirt bikes to access, that previously had only been restricted to full-size vehicles and dual sport motorcycles. They always could have gone on these roads. These roads were never actually closed to motorized access. It was just to street legal ATVs and dirt bikes. This area became popular with the street legal ATVs. Once those became popular, you have a group down there in Tickaboo, Utah that runs like tours and rentals, and this is right out their backyard. They wanted people to go and do this trail, and it would make a loop. But if they there's like an 8-mile segment, of this Poison Spring Trail where they just wanted to be able to use it to go make a loop. So that got asked for. The Trump administration allowed it. That is what current management has been through most of the Biden administration. But SUA sued the agency over the allowance of those street legal vehicles across that land, citing potential environmental damage. The supervisor there, basically, or superintendent, she entered into a settlement. My belief is kind of under duress. I think the higher ups in Washington are like, we're going to settle this way. I don't have any proof that that's what's happened, but just the vibe I get is that's how this played out, because the settlement required the superintendent to actually forfeit some of their administrative discretion and power. And I have never seen a superintendent being willing to voluntarily do that.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's a weird thing to have in a legal settlement, a weird thing for a judge to just conjure up out of nowhere with no statutory basis. And so that settlement required them to reanalyze those trails, and it was always like pre-baked that they were going to close them.
Right.
And so that decision came out the final hours of the Biden administration. And we appealed it as soon as it came out, or at least did a notice of appeal. But then the Federal Register, like Biden kind of put out or Trump put out an executive order kind of saying anything that got signed in this period of time, like a week before the inauguration day, is under review. And this fell into that window. And so they kind of suspended the implementation date for like 30 days. And then they suspended it again kind of indefinitely because of pending things within the administration and then also Congress. And now that Congress is acting, it's like, and so the settlement decision never actually went into effect and likely never will. And so, but that's kind of,
Okay.
and that's a good setup for like why we're challenging like the San Rafael Swell Plan and the Henry Mountains, because those were also kind of rushed out the door in that same window. The Swell Plan came out earlier, and it did a lot of things we didn't like. I mean, if you read the complaint, you'll see a litany of trails we've listed that they closed that are problematic. A lot of them were some dirt bike single track trails that are awesome. Not the most popular ones, but they're the locals in that area that use it still highly value the trails they did close. And a lot of the spurs to campsites and things like what we saw in Moab, it really was like the dirt bike users and the dispersed camping users was who got hammered hard in the San Rafael Swell Plan. But then they also closed all kinds of roads around the wilderness areas that got created there by the Dinkle Act. And the Dinkle Act specifically said you can't create wilderness buffer zones around these wilderness areas. But if you go look at SUA's American Red Rock Wilderness Protection Act and look at what they still want to be wilderness in that San Rafael Swell area that they didn't get designated in that through the act of Congress, even though they did get 600,000 acres designated there, they still want more. And if you go look at what their proposed wilderness map is and then overlay that with what the travel plan did, they created new wilderness through a travel plan. They through the and that's a buffer zone. If I don't like we're trying to get the court to answer that question. What is a wilderness buffer zone? Because every time Congress creates wilderness, they have it's almost boilerplate. You shall not create buffer zones around this. But and SUA's argument is, well, the agency has discretion to close it under this provision of FLPMA, so they can still so the agency can just use FLPMA to create wilderness. Then why do we need Congress to create wilderness? Why even have the Wilderness Act at that point? Let's just repeal it. And so it's interesting because also SUA's bragged on their website that their Red Rock Wilderness Act has been the basis of administrative protections. And that is like not just problematic, it's damningly deviant. Like the administration, an administrative state is still bounded by law that has been passed by both houses of Congress and signed by a president of the United States. They do not have the discretion to make decisions based off of legislative proposals.
Right.
But that's what SUA is saying, is they're saying our legislative proposal that has never been passed has been the basis of administrative protections.
That's problematic.
Yeah. And so they're admitting it's admitted, acknowledged, openly celebrated lawlessness by the purest definition of that word.
Right.
It is that we are doing things that are not lawful. There is no law underwriting this.
If we say it's related to this, people might believe us and leave us alone about it.
Yeah, but and then you go look into what they say, and it's also duplicitous. Like they say, they have like a 2-pager of like, what's wilderness? And they're like, well, wilderness restricts these activities. It restricts bulldozing and motorized recreation and power tools and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, we know that. Okay. And then they go down and what's the difference between national parks and wilderness? Well, national parks often still have like roads in them, but wilderness is roadless areas that have, and I'm like, okay. So, and I'm pointing this all out because I've seen their staff push back on me on like Facebook comment threads where like, this isn't just about roads. I'm like, well, go read your own stupid 2-pager then and update it because that's where I'm getting this from is you guys. And I'm not making this up.
Right.
And then they go and say, well, our proposal, the Red Rock Wilderness Act, that's 8 million acres of land in Utah, all qualifies as roadless area, and there are no roads in any of the lands we've proposed for our wilderness designation proposal.
I'm pretty sure that's a blatant lie then.
Well, do you know who you can go find proof of that from? Go read SUA's comment. Any one of them on any of these plans. Go look at the Labyrinth Rim comment from SUA. And they will have 4 pages of analysis for hundreds of roads, pictures, GPS coordinate points, analysis of why, like, what's the purpose of this road, and if it's got too many bushes growing in it, and all, like, and they paid a staffer to go out there and document the existence of all these roads that they're also claiming don't exist, and that the areas they're proposing for wilderness are all roadless.
Right.
Even though their own comment document, and the fact that we're in this legal settlement for decades about tens of thousands of miles of roads that they want to see closed, and that they are analyzing themselves through the public comment process to the tune of thousands of these roads. It's like they just want it both ways. They know the general public, their general supporter, is that dumb to just believe all this crap.
Yeah. Well, they don't do the research. They don't. Most of them aren't plugged into it. They buy their, and I'll say this if it's controversial or not, but they buy their REI stuff or whatever it is that they're grabbing, and they donate to the cause, thinking that they're helping. And the next thing you know, they're on the chopping block for crampons, not being able to install crampons in the wilderness. And it's all fun and games until they actually come for your stuff.
Yeah, which is, the Wilderness Act isn't going to last. It can't withstand the onslaught of battery powered technology that's coming. Have you seen the Kawasaki robot horse that you can go ride around?
Yeah, I couldn't tell if that was AI or not. I know it was a concept, but I couldn't tell if the video was
but
AI.
like,
Yeah.
are we to the point where we could build something like that? I mean, you've seen the true, real Boston Dynamics robots that basically can function like that.
It's mildly terrifying.
We're not that far off. There's bionic exoskeleton suits that help you run faster or give you broader endurance, and we're all going to be using these. Like, they're going to be our generation side by side, and they're all going to be motorized.
Well, and we've had a preview of that fight with e-bikes. Like that's
of course
that concerns me, I think.
And so this like pathologically stupid aversion to a motor is not going to last, is my prediction.
That sounds about right. Yeah, it's the folks that hate technology and think that it's going to be the end of us, and it may indeed be the end of us, but we can't avoid it either. It's coming.
We're all like, if you ask anybody, like, I'm Gen X, but if you go like millennial lower and ask them to choose between a functional natural planet and their phone.
Yeah, I don't think you even need to finish that sentence. I think we both know the answer to that.
Like, it's not gonna, like, the politics of this will shift, the demographics will shift. It's gonna be an interesting time.
You know, it's funny. I was just having this conversation with folks that have a single track committee here, and they were talking about the fact that, yeah, I think kids have that mentality of, yeah, it's don't you dare tell me not to use my iPhone, but also they're the ones that stay the trail the most. They're the ones that respect those things the most. So it's interesting to see that balance of both, and as that I'll say it, that complaining, that the generation that likes to just complain about everything that's changing right now, it starts to fade away a little bit. I think that's going to become the dominant voice.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll take probably 10 or 15 more years to fully like materialize into a new paradigm, but
yeah, totally.
It'll be interesting. And I think this concept of wilderness will have been an interesting experiment and exercise, but that's what we're going after with the San Rafael Swell, is like, even though there is designated wilderness in there, that's where it should begin and end, is where Congress designated it, but they're definitely trying to get away.
Yeah.
If you look at the Henry Mountains, that was interesting because in between the Henry Mountains and the Swell, President Biden signed an act called the Explore Act. This was a recreation bill. It was unanimously supported in both the House and the Senate, so had 100% support from Republicans and Democrats. It's signed by President Biden. It was a mixed bag, in my opinion, but not terrible. I mean, there wasn't anything in there controversial enough to, if you got Mike Lee and you got Martin Heinrich to support it, it was like pretty middle of the road, like not much going on there. But
if everybody's dissatisfied, but everybody gets something out of it, then that's supposed to be a win, right? That's the old adage for politics.
Kind of.
That's how it's supposed to be.
Or you're passing like platitudes and not actual things that have teeth and rule. Like,
Okay.
And so, but the Film Act stuff in there was interesting. I mean, you were aware of our lawsuit to defend First Amendment rights on public land, and we've withdrawn that lawsuit because the Film Act was passed as part of the Explore Act, and it basically provided the relief we were seeking. So you no longer need a commercial film permit to go do content creation on public lands. However, you do need it for a wilderness area. If you theoretically, we don't know. I'm starting to hear stories that people are still being told they don't have their First Amendment rights if they go into a wilderness area. And so we'll see if the agencies really do enforce that against people. We'll be right back in court on that because I think I should, if I'm in a wilderness, I should be able to pull my phone out of my pocket and make a video about it.
Right.
And educate people about wilderness because I care about the Wilderness Act implementation and policy.
Right.
And if I can't go educate my members about it and in that video ask them for a donation to support my work, I've had my political speech suppressed.
There it is.
And there isn't and the government's compelling interest to protect a wilderness from that action, which is no impact at all. Just they'll say, but you can't commercialize it. I don't think the current Supreme Court, I don't think the current Ninth Circuit Court agrees with that. So I'll have that fight all day long.
Yeah, and I don't think the framework for how people get paid within that it allows for any of that right now. So it's all very murky, but it was nice to see that. I mean, that was definitely a win within that act.
Yeah, I mean, we do know that the agency was lobbying for that to get passed because of the litigation. Like they didn't have a good way out of that, so they were wanting that passed.
Okay. Anything else good come out of that?
Yeah, so the Explore Act has one sentence.
I knew that.
And it says that agencies must find ways to expand opportunities for motorized recreation within the confines of the law. That's it. What does that mean, JD?
Well, and this gets back to our previous conversations about leaving things open to interpretation in laws and acts of Congress.
Yes. And so this was an act that was written before Chevron deference was overturned. I don't know what it means necessarily, other than I do know what those words mean. The agencies must find opportunities to expand motorized recreation within the confines of the law. Anytime an agency analyzes a travel plan, they analyze alternative A, which leaves everything that's open. And that's considered a lawful alternative. And then they'll do the conservation alternative, which closes a ton of stuff. And then they'll do the middle of the road alternative, which closes some things. And then they'll choose the recreation alternative that still closes stuff.
Right.
Their whole NEPA process is hard rigged to close things. We've asked them every time to produce an alternative that expands that recreation access. I have yet to see a NEPA analysis that looks at that and says, oh, yeah, we should try that. But so all they ever do is reduce access.
Right.
And so I do know that that's out of compliance with even that one sentence at its base level of what those words mean. Whether that means that applies to this action or that action, or when should the agency implement that new, like, is this that's what is left unsaid. Like, if we're analyzing a mineral resource development plan, do they have to expand recreation access? I don't know. The act didn't specify what actions this applies to.
Do you think that that's going to end up having to be something that's litigated, or that something
that is what we're litigating in the Henry Mountain lawsuit? Is I want to know if a plan which is designed to its primary purpose. This isn't mineral development. This is the travel transportation management plan. How can the recreating public come into this area? This is 99% recreation access. Like that's what this is about. It reduced that. Does that comply with this new provision of the Explore Act that requires you to expand it?
Right.
And we don't know. We'll see what a judge says.
Nice.
And so that's where, like, I want to add this because the Henry Mountains case, like, I was kind of like, we have so many other fights cooking in other states, and we have these 3 lawsuits now in Utah. And part of that's because they're all part of the same legal settlement that we kind of committed to years ago. And so it looks like we're in 3 lawsuits, but we're really in 3 different tracks of a lawsuit we started a while ago that we can't walk away from because it affects so much. But these precedents we're fighting over with buffer zones and with the Explore Act and these things, these apply to everybody. If we can define these effectively here, that's going to give us legal tools we can use to go and start implementing those decisions into other states and things. And so I want folks everywhere to know, like, we're always thinking nationally about this work, and we're, even though it looks like these are concentrating in one area, there were strategic decisions that I'm not like a lot of our legal strategy I'm not going to talk about on a podcast, but that one I like talking about. I want people to know we're trying to do things that are going to broadly improve our recreation access everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a general kind of a thing for anybody who's in this kind of a fight, right? Like, if you have a larger goal to hit, or a larger goal to open things, or in other words, make some sort of a change, you're going to go for the best case you have, or the biggest case that you can make, so that you can make the biggest impact down the road.
Well, but with the Henry Mountains, it's like, or the one that happened at the right time, because
Okay.
we needed a plan. Like, we had a plan that reduced access. They had a week to go look at that act and say, hey, we have, like, if I was the Secretary of the Interior in that moment and that Congress just unanimously passed new legislation and I had pending decisions before me, I would have said, pause. What do these new laws say we have to comply with? Because if we don't do that, we're going to get sued, because those laws are now the law of the land. All of you must now find ways to adapt whatever your current in-process plans are to these new laws that are now the law.
Mm-hmm.
This agency was like, sign this, get this out the doors. We have 2 weeks before we're not in power anymore. We don't have time to do
Yeah.
that. And so it was reckless.
Yep. And here's the best part, right? As constituents now, when we now have to pay for that lawsuit twice. We're paying for the government to fight against you guys through those means, as well as trying to help you guys to fight those fights, and it didn't need to happen in the first place.
Yeah, they could have had the discretion to say, like, you can always pause a NEPA proceeding if there's new information. They're actually required to under the Administrative Procedures Act. And especially if people bring it up, and we were bringing up new things to them. Not this one. I don't know that we had time to send them a letter either, but it wasn't a secret that this got passed. A president signing a major recreation law that affects your agency, it is only affecting your agency. It wasn't like something that got buried in the 4,000-page defense spending bill. This was only
Its own thing.
recreation.
Yeah, it was its own standalone thing.
Yeah, and so they should have had the responsibility to adapt their plans to this new plan. The priority was to sign whatever they could get signed out the door. And that recklessness they should have to pay for that. That should get scrutinized. A judge should toss that out and let the agency go back and do that the right way. And let's find out what that means. And that's what we hope will happen.
Good deal. All right. Well, so before we get into then what's coming up then after the first 100 days, is there anything else that we should touch base on within the first 100 days as far as like shifts in the way things are going?
Yeah, if you don't mind, let's talk about
I got all the time in the world, buddy.
We'll talk about Guidebook Volume 3. Lost Trails Guidebook Volume 3.
Here. Yep, get yours.
This is our National Monuments edition. So the third lawsuit we filed is this challenge to the Chuckwalla National Monument. And if you haven't had a minute, and this guidebook really is trails that we found within proposed or now recently designated monuments that are at risk of closure because they're located within these potential monument boundaries. We saw with the Grand Staircase plan how far they're willing to go with a monument to use that as a tool to restrict access. They closed 1.2 million acres out of 1.8 million to motorized access, which means there is nobody. I went to the Moab trails. I went and walked them because everyone told me, oh, you can still walk there. I went to the ones that were closed and I walked them. And the only footprints that were on those trails were mine and some cow. There is nobody walking those trails now. They're closed. No one is using them. Nobody is going to go walk 1.2 million acres of the Grand Staircase. Period.
Some of us can't do a mile or two.
I don't care. I don't care who. Yeah, I don't care if you have the bionic suit and a robot horse. You're not gonna go walk 1.2 million acres. If you think you are, you don't understand size and distance of landscapes. You're not going to do it.
Right.
Like, I had a guy commenting on my thread about, let's just make this all foot traffic only. And the dude was like, let's just make it all wilderness, foot only. And he's a mountain biker. He's got like I'm like, the wilderness closes mountain biking too, right? Because he probably doesn't. He looks like he's from the East Coast, and then he had like hiked Angel's Landing. So I mean, this guy, you know what he is. He like came out here. He hiked the most pick me basic hike in all of Utah, which is
Yeah.
Angel's Landing is great, but come on,
It's gorgeous, but
it's
it's
Disneyland.
common.
You wait in line with 400 other people, and you go up there, and then you have this moment of like, wow, this planet's so amazing, and I'm gonna that hike. It's like 20 acres. The whole hike is like 20 acres, but you've ascended 3,000 feet. You've done this thing that's like, for most people, it's really strenuous thing to do. Then you get up there and you're looking down this cliff that's 1,500 feet straight down, and you've never done anything like that. And you're like, wow, it's like, that's our whole state. And you just did 20 acres of it. And it probably took you a whole day to do it, beat the crap out of you physically. There is no way you're going to go do 1.2 million acres of that. None of you are.
Yep. 100%.
And so if they close it to motorized access, that just means no one's going in. That is close to human access.
Right.
If it's 1.2 million acres.
And then at public land, what is it doing for us? If it's not,
and they'll say, good, it's not for you. It's just for the bees and the bats and the pronghorn antelope and some weed that we've discovered that's really important. And they'll find all kinds of things that it's for, but it is not for you. It is the most anti-human religion out there. And that's, if they're being honest, that's what they want. They just don't want people there.
No, you're right, and I feel like we've said that before. I think that when you press people on those types of questions about, well, why do you think this, and then you challenge them with an answer like, well, that doesn't really add up here, and if you keep pressing them, then eventually you usually just get to the point where I just don't think people should be out there. Like well, then that's not really an answer, though. That's not really an explanation of why we shouldn't be using this land that we have. And it amazes me when you have those discussions with people, like you are actually just thinking about the fact that we aren't a country of 350 million people that just keeps growing and aren't going to need more space for those folks as time goes on. Like there's no way. There's no way.
Yeah, and so I tend to be opposed to that. I don't want 1.2 million acres closed. I don't think the few people that are, even with motorized access, it's still a very, very small amount of people that are venturing there. It's still a hard place to get to in a rig, and so the people who are willing to venture out and do that, great. I bet they're getting a really awesome experience. Let's not take that from them for really frivolous reasons. And so that's why we want people to go fall in love with all these other potential monuments. Like these are all places you need to go explore. For every trail that's in here, there's going to be dozens or more in those areas that are still open. And the good news is I don't think we'll see any of these monuments get created in the next 4 years. I think we have a window where you have some time to go take advantage of this, put this on your bucket list, go explore these trails, let us know what you see. And so there are two ways people can get one of these I'll talk about, and you can tell me which one you want to put in the show notes. The first one is they go to losttrailsguidebook.com. That's easy. That's always where we have these available. You make a donation to our work to keep these areas open, and we'll send one out to you. But since you say you're going to post this tomorrow, this is May 1st today. Tomorrow is May 2nd. May 3rd is my birthday. And we are currently running a sweepstakes at BlueRibbon Coalition to give away 2 awesome custom dirt bikes, a Yamaha YZ250 and a Yamaha T7. There will be 2 winners, one for each bike. And I'm going to create a promo code for my birthday to thank everybody for doing what we do.
That's awesome, dude.
And you'll get double entries into the sweepstakes, and I will send everybody a guidebook that decides to enter the sweepstakes during my on my birthday. It's my gift back to you guys to go out and explore your public lands and go check out these proposed monument areas. And so I can get you the link to that'll have the promo code kind of embedded into it. And if people want to go and get a birthday guidebook, that's what I got for you. And
awesome, man. Yeah, let me know and I will flash it across the bottom of the screen here what it's going to be, and I'll put the link in the show notes too.
Yeah, I'll email you that after so you can have that. But so that's Guidebook Volume 3. But I do want to talk a little bit about this Chuckwalla Monument.
Yeah.
Because
we have all the time in the world, man. I'll talk to you about this stuff forever.
I've read a lot of these monument proclamations, and this one is just wild. Like, they don't even care
Yeah.
anymore to try to make these compliant with the law.
Yeah.
So, first of all, the Antiquities Act makes it clear that it has to be protecting an object, right? And they have to limit the size of the monument to the smallest size compatible with protecting the object. And there was a debate in Congress at the time when they were passing this, and there were concerns that it would be used to be like a land grab. They were there. This is in the record of them debating this, and then you have, I believe, Representative Bill Lacey, and he's talking to Representative Stevens from Texas, and this is their conversation. How much land will be taken off the market in Western states by the passage of the bill? This is Mr. Stevens. This is Mr. Lacey, who's supporting the bill. Oh, not very much. The bill provides that it shall be the smallest area necessary for the care and maintenance of the objects to be preserved. Mr. Stevens of Texas, would it be anything like the Forest Reserve Bill, by which 70 or 80 million acres of land in the United States have been tied up? Mr. Lacey, certainly not. The objective is entirely different. It is to preserve these old objects of special interest in the Indian remains in the pueblos of the Southwest, while the other reserves the forests and the watercourses. So certainly not this won't be used to create reserves of millions of acres in size, according to the congressional record of the debate around the purpose of this bill in the early 1900s when they were debating it.
Okay.
Okay, but they still have like broadened that out to be like, when I was in court in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, the judge there asked the lawyer of the government representing the Biden administration if a president could identify objects, whatever, grass, whatever, that he wants to protect, could he designate every acre of federal land into the state of Utah into a monument? Yeah, if they did their analysis right, yeah, they could do that. So yeah, like, so either this is something limited to some specific objects in a small area compatible, and they even talk about sizes of like a few hundred acres.
Yeah.
Or the certainly not 80 million acres, but that's what it's become, because when they designated the Chuckwalla Monument, then they announced, oh, and this is now the completion of the Moab to Mojave corridor with 18 million acres of protected land. So they're like talking about tens of millions of acres of protected land that they've abused the Antiquities Act to create reserves. And so and then you go look at Chuckwalla at the objects that they did identify to like justify the 600,000 acres.
Yeah. I'm not going to like this, am I?
Oh, it's all kinds of fun. He disregarded, so this is in our complaint that we filed today. Near the end of his presidency, former President Biden disregarded the constraints of the Antiquities Act and designated 624,000 acres of the Chuckwalla region as a national monument. The proclamation describes the Chuckwalla region as the site of various wildlife in need of protection, the location of the crew training for Apollo 13 and 15, the location of Camp Young, where administrative buildings once but no longer stand, an area where the Fish and Wildlife Service are considering reintroducing the Sonoran Desert pronghorn, and a place of trails of which physical traces remain. And so the proclamation places the most emphasis on the religious, spiritual, historic, cultural for the tribal nations. According to the proclamation, many sites are not easily accessible and are concealed by rugged canyons, although a small fraction of land has been formally inventoried. The proclamation claims that there are many, maybe, artifacts yet to be discovered. So theoretical artifacts are there.
Right.
We could potentially find an artifact, and in that case, it's protected. They didn't even know where the artifacts are. They just said they're probably there, so we're protecting them. That's an object to be protected. Is this thing we don't even know where or what it is, or where we couldn't find it if you paid us. It's a non-object. Like, this is an exercise in like complete legal absurdity to me. And so we are arguing that it's unlawful because it can't be understood as an object under the Antiquities Act. The hodgepodge justification that includes various species, non-existent buildings, undiscovered antiquities, the possibility of a reintroduction of an animal. So they want to protect an animal that currently isn't there as an object.
And we might bring it back.
And obliterated trails of significance are not objects themselves, and they can't be consolidated to make the Chuckwalla region an object. Because that's what they're trying to say, is that the whole region is an object, that it's an object situated upon the landscape, that the landscape is an object situated upon the land. Like the English language either means stuff or it doesn't for these people.
It doesn't. I think we know that by now. We've been talking about this stuff for a while.
And so it's a fun complaint. Go read it. Go read the proclamation and see if anyone else can go make sense of it.
No, I think you're right. I think that's one of those valid things. I think there's a lot of stuff that's kind of got added in there at the end because somebody told somebody it was a good idea, and this just added to the pile of stuff. And yeah, it's what bothers me about those things is when anybody takes the smallest of microscopes to it and just takes a look at it, and they're just this is absurd. I don't know what you're talking about. You're telling me I can't build a skyscraper in this city because there might be some architectural stuff under the ground here that we don't know about. That's not the way it works. It's just not the way it works.
Yeah, and if you find it, great. Let's protect it. If you found some pot shards in a arroyo in the Chuckwalla National Monument somewhere,
yeah,
the smallest area compatible to protecting that archaeological find, I'd be shocked if you needed more than an acre.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they've gotten really to the point where they just have convinced themselves that they can make this mean whatever they possibly want it to mean.
How long ago was that proclamation written?
So that was like when the monument was released. So when was that? Like late December or early January?
Okay, so then I think there's a fair to good chance at least part of all of it was written by ChatGPT. Maybe that's why it sounds so ridiculous.
I mean, it could have been, but I actually think there's some environmental lawyer out there that's actually really proud of this. That thinks they just like hit all of the notes and this like perfectly, and that this is just a symphony of beautiful language and policy making, and they're just so proud of themselves. I promise you, that's really what it is.
Yeah, well, if you're that person, please feel free to reach out to us at our phone number on the website.
Yeah, we'd love to interview you about.
I'll bring Ben back. We'll have a good discussion.
Yeah, because it's too self-indulgent. Somebody is too proud of this, I got and that's like another problem with the Antiquities Act is it's like if you've actually like been in a policy fight and like a legislative debate and you're like arguing over the meaning of like a single word and some senators like blocking your bill because they don't like two sentences. It's like, that's what the legislative process should look like. Have you ever signed a mortgage?
Unfortunately, yes.
How many papers was in the mortgage?
Good Lord. I have the pack of it still upstairs, at least 100.
100 pages of transactional details around what size is your property acreage wise. And so property policy is something that gets covered by volumes of paperwork and policy implementation because everybody's dealing with liabilities and risks and property value and ownership of a property right. And that's like the whole country's built on that all working. Mm-hmm. And then you get the poet laureate coming in here. And this is just high poetry. We're going to write this proclamation about the desert of the Chuckwalla.
Uh-huh.
And this is property policy. Like this should be nuts and bolts and minutiae of how is this going to work. And that's not the game they're playing. This is building a public relations narrative to justify the shutdown of this by manipulating people's feelings into supporting the shutdown of the American natural resource base.
Yeah.
It's propaganda. This isn't policy. And so the proclamation it's just garbage. And so we're the Chuckwalla Monument, but like we're making the legal claims here are fantastic. We were partnered with Texas Public Policy on this one, and everyone should go read the proclamation and understand how they do this.
Yeah, I'm going to highly recommend because now you asked me about it before, and I don't know if it was on or off the air, but I have not read the Chuckwalla thing, but now I feel like I have to.
You should go read it. It's just to understand it. Like it should like it's weird enough that we believe that the president of the United States could just like at his will write something like that, and that's now the law of the land.
Right.
All these people are freaking out that Trump's doing any of that right now, by the way, like this executive policy making. And so I'm willing to have an open debate about what should presidents be able to do if they're really willing to open that debate now, because anyway, that it's interesting that if it's immigration, absolutely, this should all be reined in. But if it's setting aside 18 million acres of the Moab to Mojave corridor. Of course, a president could do that. Why would we even question that? And it's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution gives the Congress all legislative control over the land of the United States of America. And just because the Congress has been successful in delegating all of its constitutional authorities away to a president doesn't mean that that's how it should last. I don't believe the current Supreme Court is super bought into that paradigm anymore. I think that's going to be one of the big generational paradigm shifts that happen in our legal system.
That's been a through line of belief for you too. It doesn't matter what the administration is. We shouldn't be making public lands policy by executive order.
Yeah, because it's in the Constitution that it's the Congress that should do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
we shouldn't be doing it through a travel plan and a wilderness buffer zone because Congress said very explicitly that wilderness designation is something we do.
Exactly.
And so hopefully we win on this, and we'll see. Well, we don't know. I mean, Trump has signaled he might reverse monuments. Well, my hope is that something happens in the near short future that creates a permanence around this issue. So whether the Congress does something or the courts, because otherwise the permanent policy will be that the Moab to Mojave corridor will become the Manitoba to Mexico corridor, and we won't have anything open for multiple use anymore.
No, I mean, and the other concern, right, is that it becomes the Moab to Mojave corridor, and then it becomes just open public land for 4 years, and then 8 years later it becomes the corridor again, and it's a nightmare to even think about it.
But the bright side lining of that nightmare is that you are now in a 4-year window where you can go out and do the most important thing you can do to support this fight, which is to go explore these trails and areas that are at risk of closure through a national monument, which you can do by getting Lost Trails Guidebook Volume 3.
There it is. No,
we actually believe that. We know that if we get people out there and see the truth on these, it's heartening to me in our comments on social media when I see our users coming in and being like, I've been there, you're full of
right.
Actually ground truthing what's happening in these areas, and they're hard to get to. It's going to be a trip. It's going to be an adventure. It's going to be worth every minute. It's going to give you a purpose more than just I'm going out to get away. And so go do it. Go do it with purpose and go explore new areas and have new adventures, but do it for these reasons. We need your help to keep stuff open.
Yeah, and I'm not plugging Trails Off Road here. They did a bunch of work on this book, though. I did notice that.
Close partners.
There's I've been working with them since the get, and there's a reason for it, because I've long believed that going out and documenting these trails and showing people that they're being used is super important. And it doesn't matter if it's a 1/4 mile long trail or if it's a 600-mile long trail in the middle of a monument. It's important that people get out there, put feet on the ground, put tires in the ground, and take pictures and document what they see or what they don't.
I agree 100%. So
there you go. All right.
Anyway, so I guess what we could end on is what is the next? What's looking forward look like? And we've kind of
what's for the next 100 years for Ben? Yeah. Uh-huh.
No, but even the next 100 days, right?
Yep.
We've filed 3 lawsuits so far this year, and that's like me keeping a promise, right? We've told people for the last 2 years, if you guys support us, if you donate to BlueRibbon Coalition, we will invest in full-time lawyers. We will try to challenge everything we can. We have more in the works. We're working on more. I had a 3-hour meeting with my policy team and lawyer this week to talk about what are the next bites going to be. And that's all I'm going to say. There will be more. And so we have a lot. We believe right now is an amazing opportunity to be exploring the court system and what can be done through the courts to create permanent reforms that improve our access to our public lands. There will be congressional bills that we hope to see get passed. One of them is the Ending Presidential Overreach on Public Lands Act. That would be permanent reform of the Antiquities Act through an act of Congress. They would basically return the power to Congress and not keep it with the president.
Okay.
We expect that the Outdoor Americans with Disabilities Act will get reintroduced. We'd love to see that get traction and pass. It would require agencies to keep a minimum level of road density available on public lands so that all Americans can go out and enjoy them.
Yep. I'm a huge proponent of that particular one, and I highly recommend everybody check that one out, the Operation Accessible stuff, because that's part of the reason why I do what I do is because I can't hike this stuff. I can't get out there by myself. I need those roads to go out and explore the stuff.
Yep. And so we want to see some big legislative changes. We will go back and hopefully meet with some of the administrative officials when they're there and give them those grand reopening books I showed you earlier that have the hundreds of actions that either need to just be rescinded or paused permanently, withdrawn. And some of them are good. And then we want to see our community rally behind all the good stuff they're trying to do. Look past the kind of sensationalist rhetoric. Look at the actual projects. We'll do everything we can to get more of those in front of you so that we're actually rooting our attention and our energy and our effort on things that are actually going to happen. And there's going to be a lot of that. And I think a lot of it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be good. And I think if we add our voice to it, it'll be even better, because I think we just need to learn to ask for what we want now, because we've been so pistol whipped into just settling for getting whatever scraps are left over.
Right.
Let's go ask for what we want. See if they'll give it to us. I think there's people there that are coming in that if we just go ask them a reasonable thing that's recreation access, I think they'll give it to us. Especially if we're backed by a good grassroots group of people that will support that. And that was something when we went to Washington, we were meeting with a congressional staff member there. And at first they all think we're good. They've seen this before. They think we're just like another sportsman's group or another kind of a left-leaning environmentalist organization or something, because it's like we're public lands and we want access and whatever. And then they meet with us and like, you guys are like different. There's like nobody else out here like you that are doing what you're doing. You've actually like commented on all these plans. Like you have this much on the ground knowledge of what's happening in our agencies. It's like, that's just shocking. But it's like, which big corporations funding you guys? Like who's bankrolling this? And I'm like, well, it depends on who you ask. Are you asking me, the executive director that monitors the audits and the financials and the 990s and everything we go out to create public transparency around our financial condition? Or are you asking the environmental groups that don't like what we're doing? Because if you ask them, it's some big nebulous oil company, because the multi-trillion dollar oil company wouldn't succeed at serving its interests without BRC there to
without BRC making sure that oh my gosh,
it's like just comical to me that. And so like it's actually, we are honestly our members. We have a membership base that supports us. A lot of them join for $5 a month, and we have a lot of those. And we have groups like UPLA, and we have groups like Red Rock Four Wheelers, and we have groups like Trail. I shouldn't name them because I'm going to miss people, but hundreds of these ATV clubs and off-road clubs and recreation clubs that support us, and they raise money for us. And that's actually like, if you look at our 990 and you see like this line for like organization donations or something, because you see our memberships there, and they're like, and that's where the environmentalists think they've got us. That's where the oil money is. It's like, nope, that's just where the money is that comes from these clubs that support us. And every single one of them, we go stand on a stage somewhere with a big check. It's not like a secret.
There's a lot of TikToks of Ben standing in places, giving speeches and getting checks. So
it is like entirely grassroots funded and supported, and we want to stay that way. People see a lot of power and authenticity in that. And so we hope people keep supporting us. I do want to add that one thing that was crazy that we found in a transition from administrations was those grants that went out through like the EPA and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a nonprofit that had been spun up by some former like Biden administration official, right? Mm-hmm. And its operating budget or whatever on the 990 was $2 million. And then it was like $5 billion. They got a $5 billion grant.
That's fishy.
It's beyond fishy, because like I mean, you can go look at the sizes of organizations, right? Like the Sierra, like you go look at our 990 and it's like around $1 million a year is kind of where we're operating at right now. Okay. Like this isn't a deep, dark secret. This is published on our website.
Yeah. Public information.
You can go look at the Sierra clubs and they're $300 million a year, right? Yeah. Impressive. Okay. They've been around for a long time. That's impressive growth. They've grown from what they were to now $300 million a year. And I think that's massive. You know, that's a big organization to comprehend and to lead something like that, knowing they're kind of in like the same wheelhouse of work, but to be scaled up to that size you think through all of the hiring, the staffing, and the growth, and to make sure that's sustainable and that you can keep that going at that level, or to organically grow to that level should take years or decades.
Right.
To go from 2 million to 5 billion overnight.
Yeah.
There's just there's nothing good's going to come of that. That is just going to be money laundering and corruption and paying off friends and political like that is as deep and dark and dirty as money gets in American politics. And they're laundering it through nonprofits. And then they have like the audacity to come to us and be like, "Oh, this is an oil company thing." It's like, come on.
Like I realize this is an unsanctioned and unasked for thing, but look, I've seen Ben hustling and talking to people at events like that. If Ben was getting the money getting that kind of money from big donors like that, you wouldn't have to put the time in at Trail Hero. You wouldn't have to put the time in at all these small events going to pick up checks. Like it's silly, but people believe it.
I probably still would though, because I actually don't think the power in this comes from the money, and that's the other part where these people that don't like us get us wrong. Mm-hmm. Is it doesn't like I know the value you get as someone who just can't get out there any other way, and the benefit you get from going out and recreating on these lands, and as long as I have the authenticity of that experience to fight for, I'm always going to have a mobilized support base of people to fall back on and go fight for these fights and win. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be long. Like the people we're up against do have really dark money and endless amounts of it, and more lawyers than you could possibly keep track of. And there's a daunting level of that on the other side. And so I think if what we're trying to build here around our recreation access to public land isn't grounded in the people who are actually doing it, and people who've actually been out in these areas and seen them and have that deep connection to a landscape, as long as I have that, that's something money can't buy. Yeah, when you're trying to influence political things, put all your chips on the thing money can't buy. You're going to win in the long run.
Yeah.
Because so many people come into this thinking they can just buy outcomes. I'm aware of how public opinion manipulation happens with people that have endless amounts.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things you can do there, but it burns out. It doesn't last. You can do it for a week or two or three or whatever, but to do it sustained, you actually have to go. You'll burn out and it'll disappear, and that's why a lot of these things fail or they're fake or whatever. We've been around since 1987.
Yeah.
And so even if the financial situation got significantly better, it's still, if it's not rooted in going to Jeep Safari with Red Rock 4-wheelers or Trail Hero or something like that, then it's like we've lost the soul and the purpose of why we're doing it.
And I was just kind of joking around, but yeah, it's seriously though. It's and that's great. I like seeing you out there. I think everybody else likes seeing you out there. It gives a chance to put the face on. Well, you're TikTok famous at this point now, right, Ben?
Probably more Instagram than TikTok, but
Instagram. Okay, there you go.
I guess I don't know.
None of us want that at all. Just so you know, we're just it's thrust on you as opposed to anything else.
I mean, kind of. It's like I do want the ideas out there, and we've turned into an effective delivery vehicle for the ideas. And as long as that keeps going, we'll keep producing it because we want. Because the other side of this is, it's like this position on national monuments, for example, it's so unorthodox. Like there's so much groupthink around this. If you're someone who likes public lands and you don't support national monument, then you must be some kind of heretic.
Right.
And they will purge you out of the discourse. I mean, you have no right to even be here. Thank you for showing your true colors, that you are elitist and exclusive, is what we've been saying about you all along.
Yeah. But it's where they lose the messaging completely.
And so we need more unorthodox thinkers, or we need more people to kind of challenge the dominant narratives. Because if you don't, then you get to a point where it's like, well, the Antiquities Act says we can protect this animal that's not here.
Right.
Or these artifacts that we haven't found. And it just becomes the emotions of the dumb masses control the narrative. And that's why they're so protective about demonizing anybody who departs from that. And so it's important. And so I hope people follow us on Instagram. And you don't have to agree with everything we put out there. We have plenty of people who disagree with this, and I learn a lot from them. And I don't always respond to them, but I'm like, okay, that's an interesting point. We should adapt what we're doing around that. And over time, we course correct based off feedback we get from people. So go be part of it. We're having a fun debate.
I just like the fact that the debate is getting to a place these days where the conversation has turned from loss after loss after loss to, yeah, we might actually have the ability to kind of maybe expand some recreation and do some of those things, and opening new trails here in Colorado and stuff like that. Stuff I would have thought was unheard of when I started wheeling here 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
it's good that that momentum has started to kick off.
Well, we want to reopen stuff. Like if we win any of these lawsuits, I want to go out. Like I was in Moab almost like the whole last 2 weeks, and I went out and looked at a lot of the trails that have been closed in labyrinth rooms. They're like all blocked off by like deadfall branches and wood and stuff. I'm like, I just want to go collect all this and put it in the bed of a pickup truck and go have a big marshmallow roast with everybody. Once we win, once it's legal and we have the authorization from the BLM, and I bet there will be some BLM staff that are right there with us, because I don't think they all agreed with that decision in their heart of hearts. They were being told what to do from Washington. We are 100% confident of that at this point. And so it'll be fun. Let's have the big marshmallow roast of the grand reopening soon. I don't know when, but I'm sending good vibes out into the universe. Let's see what happens.
All right. Well, we'll be there to post it live for you. There you go. Awesome. All right. Well,
that could be like episode 104. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think it'll be that quick, but we want to do it. It'll be fun.
It depends. It depends on how fast I get to editing all the other episodes I've got in the bin. So
no, that was being kind of optimistic. But it'll take some time. But
it's more optimism than we've had so far.
Yeah, we're thinking good thoughts about reopening our trails.
That's awesome, man. All right. Well, anything else that we should touch base on here before we get out for this particular? I think this is like your 4th or 5th appearance now.
We covered a lot, man. I'm good. If you're good.
All right. I'm fantastic, man. Thank you so much. Let me see here. What do I want to make sure that we hit before we go for you? I will definitely put in the plug for your discount code as soon as you send it for me. I'll put that in the show notes and link to it. The Lost Trails Guidebook is available at, you said losttrailsguidebook.com?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
losttrailsguidebook.com that's probably the best way to find it.
BlueRibbonCoalition.com or sharetrails.org. We got you. I got you on all of them. And then Ben and Simone, you guys have your own podcast, and that's the Defend Your Ground podcast. And that's ongoing. You guys post it all the time. And she's welcome anytime too, if you ever want to drag her in on one of these. But
we should. Yep. Yeah. No, we try to do that consistently, but man, it's been a couple months of whirlwind stuff.
Sometimes life gets away from you, and for you guys, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think people, subscribe to you to find out when they need to know something important and timely. And, for us, they expect us to do it once a week at least. Yeah. it's a different level of commitment.
We're good, man. We're good. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and subscribe to the Trailhead podcast.
Thank you very much, Ben. All right. Well, thank you all very much for riding along with us this week, and thank you for letting us be a part of your off-road adventures. Safe travels on and off-road. Always stay the trail, and we'll see you next time with the Trailhead. Night.
Thank you.
Awesome, man.